Okay, so this is Debugging with Chrome, episode 3, which is talking about using the console. So again, I'm just on that page that I recreated from features on the Elementor homepage. Press my F12 key and bring up the Dev Tools. Now the tab I want to look at is the console tab. And here I can see that I've got a 404 error. And I've also got a comment logged out to the console. So this 404, I could look over at my network tab and do an F5. And I could look through here and find out where my 404 is, and there it is there. And there might be more than one of these. So I've actually generated this on purpose, so it's trying to get something that doesn't exist. The easier way to look at that is to look in the console. It's a much briefer list of things. So it could be informational stuff that's been echoed out by JavaScript. It could be errors that have been generated by JavaScript. It could be assets that couldn't load because they either had a 404 error, not found, 403, or a 401, or a 503 error. Anything that is an error and it wasn't able to retrieve that asset or that URL, it'll appear in the list here. So you can see if my site's not working properly, or I just want to double check that there's no errors. I go into my console, press F5, and make sure there's no errors here. So it's a really simple way to look at that. So the way I've generated this error is I've just used a code snippet and I've told it to enqueue a script which doesn't exist. Now that could be a bug with a theme, could be a bug with a updated on a plugin, could be anything like that. It could be your own script that you're writing and it's got an error in the URL, or something's changed at the other end where it's being unauthorized. Whatever it is, if it gets an error back from the other end when it tries to get it, it's going to appear in the console. So it's a very, very simple way of figuring out where that is. So that's the first thing for the console. The next thing I'm going to look at in the console is the debugging of JavaScript. So what I'm doing here is just a typical closure, which I'm waiting for the DOM content to be loaded. I'm doing that so that I know jQuery is available. Okay, so firstly, I'm using the console command and I'm telling it to send some info with DOM content loaded, which is what it's putting there. If I put if I put error, I'm save that. Okay, it displays an error for DOM content loaded. If I change that to warn, reload that, I get a warning, DOM content loaded. Log is a really, really cool one. If we look at this, for example, and I've got a function here with a jQuery, and I go console.log jQuery, this isn't as useful as I'd like it to be. Actually, I've already defined that as $, so I'll just make that $. F5. What I get is its jQuery function. It's a link to the jQuery function. So let's say I want to get all of the H3s on the page. So I'm going to go log $H3. I'm using jQuery here because it's a very simple syntax. You could use vanilla JavaScript, whatever you like. This is just to show you an example. So if I log all of the H3s on the page, refresh that, and I get a jQuery collection of 37 H3s. 38 H3s, from 0 through to 37. That's a lot. All right, so let's say I want to assign H3. So I'm going to go $H3 equals that. And I'm going to put that onto the window. So I'm going to go window dot $H3 equals $H3. So I'm putting this onto the window and I'll show you why. Okay, F5. Now, from this console, you've got a little prompt. And I can use this prompt to do some scratch stuff. I can work out what's going on. So if I do console.log window dot dollar H3, it's going to show me all the H3s that I got from this selector here. So that's a really good way for debugging. If you want to figure out some stuff, you can stick it onto the window element and do it from there. Now, just a tip that I use, I don't see a lot of people doing that, but with JavaScript, you don't prefix with $. It is you can if you want, or you can prefix with anything you like. Like I can make that underscore H3. I can make it %H3. Actually, there are some characters that don't work, but with jQuery, because often, or for some time, we've referred to jQuery with the $ symbol. To keep that going, keep that easy, what I do is anything that's going to be returned as a jQuery object or a jQuery collection, I make the variable name with a $ symbol. Actually, it's not going to change, I make it a constant. Okay. That way, when we look at a variable and it's got a $, in front of it, we know we expect that to be jQuery. If it doesn't have the $, in front of it, it's just either a scalar object or a pure JavaScript object. So that's just a method that I use. Okay, so I'm using the ES6 syntax here. So I've got the $ as a constant assigned to jQuery. If I tried and reassign $ to a new value, what's going to happen is I get this uncaught type error where I've tried to assign a value to a constant. Now that is great. ES6 is very tight on this, which helps you to minimize the conflicts that you might create. If you've got a long bit of code and you redefine or reuse variable names, it won't allow you to do that if you define them correctly. Now, if I use the old syntax of var, which is the ES 2005 syntax, so I've set it as a variable, and then I've assigned it to a jQuery, and then I've reassigned it to not allowed, it's going to allow that without any errors whatsoever. So no problems at all. Didn't complain at all. If I tried to reassign that using the var keyword, F5, still didn't complain. It reassigned it, so I've already told it it's a variable. We've defined it as a variable. Down here, we've redefined it as a variable, and JavaScript did not complain at all. Most languages would complain about this because it would say, hold on, you've already defined that. So this could be a variable like name or count or something simple, where if you redefine it somewhere else, you're actually going to mess up your code. It's going to be really, really hard to debug because you've used two different variables with the same name. So by keeping it tight, it makes it a lot easier for coding. So if I said let, which is the new var, and then redefine that, again, using let again, this is the ES6 version. And then I try to refresh this page, it's going to tell me that it's already been declared. So already it has improved from the old var syntax because it's going, hold on a second, you've already defined this. What are you doing trying to redefine that again? So it'll let us define it, but it won't let us redeclare it. That makes sense. So we can only ever have one version of this variable that's defined by let. Now, if it's never going to change, then we should use constant. So const. Okay, the reason we use constant, we're saying this is a constant. We do not want to allow this to be changed at any point. If I save that, Go back to my page, refresh that. It's going to say, hold on, you've just tried to assign to a constant. So where you might do this, let's say, for example, we're going to get, take that out. We're going to get all of the H3s on the page. So if I went constant, $H3 equals $H3. I'm using jQuery. You can use pure JS if you want. Just a tip here, whenever I use variables, whether they're constants or defined with let, if it's going to return a jQuery object or a jQuery collection, I prefix it with $, so that I know to expect that this should have jQuery. It's not going to be a scalar or a built-in JavaScript object or an array or anything like that. It's going to be a jQuery object. Okay, so if I set that as a constant and then I log that out. $H3. I'm expecting to see a jQuery collection with all the H3s. So there's 38 H3s on this page. Pretty simple. If I wanted this to be on the window, I could put it on the window by going window dot $H3 equals $H3. Instead of console logging it, we'll stick it on the window object so we can access it from the console. So this is the next thing I'm going to show you with the console. So now if we refresh this, now if I have a look at the window object, so I want to log out the H3 I've just assigned to the window, I would put console.log window. Let's just do console log window. That's going to show me a collection here where we've got a whole bunch of variables, functions, methods on the window object. Okay. I can't see it in that list, but I know I've assigned it. So if I clear that and I went console window $H3. Oh, that didn't work. Why didn't that work? Typo. Okay, back here I'm going to refresh the page. Now, one of the really cool things with this prompt here, you press the arrow up, it will type in the previous command even if you've refreshed the page. I'm going to log out my H3s. So these H3s are in a jQuery collection that this jQuery selector got assigned to the constant $H3, and then we stuck it on the window object. So let's say I want to test something out here. I want to make a class. Actually, just look at our H3s here. So I think these are H3s. Let's go to our elements. I'm just going to add a class called makeRed. I'm just going to set the color to red. Color is red, okay? Now I want to assign this class to all of the H3s. I could test that one that I've just put on the window object, or I can get my own reference to it. So let's try that. So if I went window $H3, which is a jQuery collection, add class makeRed, and this is just a class that I've typed into the Chrome DevTools. I haven't actually saved that anywhere yet. If I do that, all of the H3s have just gone red because I added that class to them. Now that's got this H3 collection from this JavaScript here that's ran. Let's say I want to do it differently. Let's change that to, I'm going to go constant dollar equals jQuery. Okay, and I'm going to go $h3. Now I'm not on the window object, so I can put a new object just here, equals $h3. Okay, so I'm assigning a variable. Actually, let's use the ES6. So let's make that a constant. Constant $h3 equals $h3. So the same thing we did back in this JavaScript here, but I'm doing it directly in the console. Okay, it says undefined, but it's actually defined. Now, if I went $h3 dot remove class, make red. Now watch these H3s up here. I've removed the class, so they've returned back to black. So you can do a lot of scratch padding in here. You can try out jQuery selectors. You can try adding classes, removing classes. Go into your elements, create a class here. Come back to your console. Do a jQuery selector. Apply that to elements. See what it looks like. You can even play with it here. So I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to add the class back again. Here's our make red. We'll go back to our elements. Here's my make red. I'm going to change that color to maybe a darker red. There we go. I might make it more of an orangey color. So without having to write JavaScript and CSS and then keep refreshing your page, you can do that directly within the DevTools. That's one of the best things about the console. So that is a little bit advanced, but the other sort of thing you could do here is testing. So you might send off an XHR request somewhere, and get the result, and then log that to the console. Typical example, let's say we get I'll create a constant. Oh. And I'm going to make an array of ARR equals red, green, blue. So let's say, for example, we did an XHR request and the response we got from that was this array red, green, blue, but we weren't knowing what we're going to get back from them. If I do a console log ARR, save my changes, refresh the screen on the console, just going to clear that. There you go, we've got an array of red, green and blue. So if you don't know what you're going to get back, you can echo out things to or log out things to the console so you can see what you actually received. I mean, you can do that through, you go in the network tab, you look at your XHR requests, you can expand those out and look at what came back from the server. This is just a really quick way of debugging, writing some JavaScript. Maybe you might even apply some rules or some filters or some regexes or whatever you apply in JavaScript. You're not sure what the result's going to be, log it to your console, then you can see exactly what it is. It's a really good way of debugging JavaScript as you go. So my tips are always use ES6 because ES6 is a tighter standard. All the major browsers support it. Anything that doesn't support it isn't worth worrying about, I don't believe. If you're going to use jQuery, when you assign any jQuery objects or jQuery collections to a variable, give that variable a name with a dollar prefix, so it's just easy for you to see that that is a jQuery or it's meant to be a jQuery object or collection. Use the log to log out objects, arrays, etc. Use info if it's just informational, like you might type info, script in it, typo there, but never mind. So you might just info, that's the beginning of the script. We get down to here, we go, right, that's the end of the script. So you can actually look at, see how things are progressing. I'll just refresh that, for example. And we get our scripty instead of script in it. We get all our functions putting out stuff to the console, and then we get the end. It's a really neat way of commenting through your code, debugging, where's your code at, where are the problems, what do the objects look like that you've got, that you've either received from an XHR request or you've created yourself through whatever transitions you've done or transforms you've done. So that's pretty much the console. I think it's brilliant. There's probably a lot more you can do with this that we haven't talked about here. All right, so that's the end of episode 3 on using the Chrome DevTools console. I think it's brilliant, and I'm sure that you're going to get a lot of value out of this. Spend some time figuring it out, using it, and working out what you can do with it, and I'm sure it's going to help you in your coding.